In Eastern Europe, the war over Ukraine has heated up to unprecedented levels. Despite being cautioned against it, the Russian President Vladimir Putin has authorized the use of chemical weapons against the stubborn Ukrainian resistance. Thousands have died since the attacks began. The President of the United States had warned Putin there would be an appropriate response if he dared to use weapons of mass destruction. Stockpiles of American VX gas had been moved to Europe in anticipation of just such an event, and now cruise missiles laden with the deadly gas rain down amongst Russian troops. VX is banned by the UN's Chemical Weapons Convention of 1993, but the US has retained its Cold War-era stockpiles as a deterrent. Now, thousands of Russian soldiers die as the deadly nerve agent paralyzes their bodies, and they slowly asphyxiate to death. Russia is quick to respond with the use of low-yield tactical nuclear weapons inside NATO bases in Poland. President Putin claims these bases are legitimate targets, as it's thought here that the NATO and partner nations such as Japan and Australia have been resupplying the Ukrainian army. Thousands more die in the attacks, and NATO responds in kind. Just hours later, NATO nuclear weapons are striking bases along the Russian border, destroying troops, armored vehicles, aircraft, and thousands of tons of critical supplies badly needed by Russian forces inside Ukraine. For 12 hours, there is no reply, and the world breathes a sigh of relief. Perhaps this small exchange of tactical nuclear weapons is enough. Maybe a full-blown nuclear confrontation can be avoided. Those hopes are dashed, however, as 12 hours and 11 minutes after the first nuclear strikes inside Russia, Russia's nuclear forces unleash a small but deadly salvo against NATO's strongest member, the United States. The United States has approximately half an hour to react, but can the US rally, defend the homeland from a nuclear attack? The first line of defense against nuclear weapons comes with detection, and for this task, the United States has been operating Defense Support Program satellites for decades. The special satellites use very sensitive infrared sensors to detect the telltale infrared plume of a rocket launch, and they do it from a geosynchronous orbit, many thousands of miles above the Earth. Their unique orbit allows them to always face the same side of the Earth at all times, so they can remain vigilant 24/7 and have zero lapse in surveillance. Traditional satellites that orbit the Earth will only be able to observe one part of the Earth for a limited time, and even constellations of satellites can produce coverage gaps over time. An added defense, the high altitude of DSP satellites make them difficult to destroy or interfere with from Earth, making them more resilient during a conflict. Defense Support Program satellites are aging, however, and currently being replaced with the new generation space-based infrared system, which builds on the core concepts of DSP and adds more robust capabilities, such as better resolution to detect the launch of even smaller, shorter-range missiles, and an increased resiliency against attempts to spoof, jam, or destroy them. Sibir's HiGeo-1 was launched on May 7, 2011, and two other classified satellites believed to be a part of the program were also launched in 2006 and 2008. Further satellites have since been launched, giving the United States a robust early warning capability. Sibir's Low was planned to be a constellation of 24 lower-orbit satellites meant to also track ballistic missiles, but with the ability to distinguish between warheads and decoys, a critical need if an incoming nuclear attack is to be stopped. The system would have had two major sensors, a scanning infrared sensor which would acquire ballistic missiles during the boost stage of flight, and a tracking infrared sensor which would follow the missiles and also track warheads, debris, and decoys. Sibir's Low was eventually absorbed into the Space Tracking and Surveillance System program, which aimed to test technologies for the tracking of missiles to aid in targeting. STSS proved to be very successful, tracking not just traditional ballistic missiles and their payloads, but even intermediate-range ballistic missiles which have a shorter flight time and are thus harder to track and target. In tests, the STSS program was successfully destroying intermediate-range ballistic missiles by guiding interceptors to their targets. The program further proved its capabilities on the 8th of July 2011 when it was tested against a short-range air-launched target, simulating a shorter-range air-launched cruise or similar missile. Since these missiles are already hoisted up high into the atmosphere, they're much smaller and dimmer as they require less powerful rockets burning for a shorter amount of time to get them to their target. In September 2021, the two satellites taking part in STSS testing were decommissioned and moved to higher orbits to prevent accidental collisions in the future with other objects in the same orbit. Since then, the US has been very secretive about any low-altitude missile tracking and targeting systems, but it's likely they're looking for more survivable options given the proliferation of anti-satellite weapons in the militaries of China and Russia. Once an incoming missile is tracked, targeting data can be fed to interceptor systems, and of those, the US has a few with varying rates of success. During the Cold War, President Ronald Reagan imagined a comprehensive anti-ballistic missile defense system that would make the United States safe from nuclear attack. Since then, attempts to implement successful missile defense systems have proven difficult. The main problem is that ballistic missiles are moving at thousands of miles an hour, giving any defenses very little time to react, and even less time to launch a second set of countermeasures if the first fails. The second problem is the sheer altitude of an incoming ballistic missile. These missiles leave the atmosphere and cruise through space for the mid-course portion of their flight, meaning that any defense against ballistic missiles requires the ability to reach up and into space. This requires a missile of significant size if taking the traditional ballistic approach. Another option is laser weapons, but they're mostly ineffective due to atmospheric scattering, and would instead need to be installed on satellites. Thanks to dispersal of the beam, though, these satellites would have to be fairly low in orbit, which means you would need a lot of them to maintain a constant screen of protection over the US homeland. The next issue is actually hitting the missile itself. Our best option for missile defense is kinetic, meaning that the best method we have for destroying a nuclear ballistic missile is by using another missile. However, this requires two missiles moving at thousands of miles per hour to physically ram into each other. A ballistic missile is moving so fast that a traditional anti-air kill method, such as fragmentation warheads that only require a missile get close to its target to shred it with shrapnel, simply aren't effective. Plus, ballistic missiles are large, and once they're in their mid-course phase, simply shredding some critical systems isn't going to stop it from releasing its nuclear payload on your head. It's been described as hitting a bullet with another bullet, and requires math so precise it would make Einstein himself cry to sleep at night. Even the slightest miscalculation or a particularly strong gust of wind as the interceptor rises to the sky could be enough to spell a miss, and thus the US has developed some very powerful computers to guide interceptors to their targets. To be safe, though, an intercept attempt will typically involve multiple interceptors. But there's yet another hurdle in knocking out any incoming enemy ballistic missiles: decoys and countermeasures. A modern missile is capable of carrying multiple warheads, but only some of these will be real. The rest will be dummy warheads meant to lure enemy interceptors. This means that it's best to intercept a missile before it has a chance to release its payload. But this is highly unlikely and requires missile defenses very close to the launch site. It's the entire reason that Russia has been so cautious about US missile defenses in Europe, and China has joined in after the deployment of US missile defenses to South Korea. With multiple decoys, an interceptor has to strike the correct target, or else you've just wasted a very expensive missile of your own and accomplished nothing. But ballistic missiles will also carry chaff to confuse radar tracking the incoming warheads, basically a cloud of highly radar-reflective material. It's unstealth technology meant to be as visible as possible and thus confuse radar, making targeting impossible. The best or worst part is that it's really cheap too, basically costing only a few $1,000s while defeating radars and computer systems costing tens of millions of dollars. So how in the world does the US defend against a nuclear attack? The main defense against nuclear attacks on the homeland seeks to destroy the enemy missile during the mid-course phase. This is when a missile has entered space and is cruising along, making small adjustments and preparing to enter the atmosphere. This will be the largest portion of the missile's flight path, depending on how far away the target is. To knock enemy missiles out of space, the US has developed the ground-based mid-course defense system. These large missiles are designed to fly into space and smack head-on to an enemy missile, using a dummy kinetic kill warhead to smash the enemy missile into dust. The system consists of approximately 60 interceptors deployed in two bases, one in Fort Greely, Alaska, and one in Vandenberg Space Force Base, California. A third site was proposed to be based in Poland, but Russia got extremely upset over it and was eventually canceled. This geographic dispersal allows GMD missiles to knock out threats coming from Europe, which would be traveling over the North Pole, and threats from Asia or the Pacific. If you're wondering how the system defends against missile launches from enemy submarines close to shore, it doesn't. And you better hope that on that day the US Navy's on the ball and hunting down hostile subs. The GMD system is made up of 6 main subsystems. The first is the exo-atmospheric kill vehicle. This consists of a solid metal 140-pound interceptor fitted with various maneuvering thrusters. These thrusters wouldn't help the kill vehicle accelerate, but are instead there to help the interceptor make course adjustments and hit its target with pinpoint accuracy. The exo-atmospheric kill vehicle was meant to be replaced with a redesigned kill vehicle in 2025, but the contract was canceled due to serious design problems detected by the Department of Defense. A replacement will have to wait until the next generation interceptor program begins to mature. Next is the boost vehicle, the massive rocket that carries the interceptor up into space. This comes with its own missile silo and silo interface vault, all located underground. The Battle Management Command, Control, and Communication System, or BMC-3, helps guide the missile to its target by feeding it targeting data and ensuring uninterrupted communications with the interceptor and boost vehicle. Ground-based radar, space-based early warning radars, and forward-based X-band radars all make up the final subsystems of the GMD program. These veritable fleet of radars are all designed to provide high-resolution data during various phases of an incoming missile's flight, and their capabilities are classified at the highest levels. It's thought that these highly sensitive radar systems are so capable that they can detect aliens farting inside their UFOs, and they need to be if they're going to have any chance of hitting an incoming ballistic missile with another missile. GMD's effectiveness has been a subject of much contention, especially since it's cost the US billions of dollars. To date, the system has a success rate of about 55%, and critics are quick to point out that none of these tests have been carried out against dummy targets using a full suite of countermeasures. In reality, one could expect a success rate much lower than 55%. Luckily, the US has a